This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are checking us out. SoFlo Radio, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, WPWC in Washington, D.C., or, of course, if you're checking out the podcast. Joining us now, a return visit to the show, Nicole Flato, Justice Editor of Think Progress. You can check her out on Twitter at Nick Flato, and of course all of her links will be up with the blog post, and she is often cited by this show and so many more for her amazing work. Nicole, thanks for coming back on and joining us again.
Glad to be back, Danielle.
Oh, we are exceptionally happy to have you. This week, the Supreme Court, everybody was kind of waiting for the gay marriage decision and the voting rights decision, so they weren't really following the smaller cases. And I think that one of them that you wrote a great piece about has a much larger impact than most people have realized, and that's the case of these merchants challenging American Express's monopoly over credit card fees and charges. Can you explain that case a little bit and why you decided to write about it?
Sure. So this is an issue that I and others have been following for some time, and it's the issue of access to the courts and also access to be able to challenge egregious corporate practices, oftentimes via the courts. And a particular issue in this area that's been bubbling up in the last few years is the issue of arbitration. So what happens is you have a contract, typically a boilerplate contract with a big corporation, whether it be for your cell phone or your cable bill or whatever. And merchants or small businesses have similar sorts of contracts with a large corporation. And the idea is that it contains a clause saying if you have a dispute, if you have a beef with the company, you necessarily have to go to arbitration, which is an alternative to going to court. And what it means is that you go before this private person who decides your case. Now, that's one element that people object to. There's a second element, which is a lot of times these contracts also say you can only go to arbitration as an individual and you can't file these claims together. Now, that second issue is actually what was going on here. And basically what happened was you've had a series of cases in which individuals have been foreclosed from filing these challenges together, and the consequence is that they haven't been able to file these challenges at all because it's really not affordable, and it's prohibitively expensive. It costs more to file the challenge than you would make in return. One of the pretty well-known cases that came up a few years ago was an incident in which AT&T was allegedly charging an extra $30 fee to every single person, and a number of people wanted to charge this fee, but no one was going to go to the expense of charging this fee alone because it was only $30.
Right.
In the cumulatively, they were making a lot of money off of this and bilking a lot of people off of $30 each. So it's a similar concept that was at issue here, but what's interesting about it is this time it was a number of businesses challenging American Express, smaller merchants who wanted to allege together that American Express was engaging in monopolistic practices that were allowing them to charge higher fees for their credit card arrangements. And this case was different in a lot of ways from the AT&T case, but it was similar in the sense that the argument about the feasibility of filing these challenges alone was at issue. And the court came to the same result, which is you cannot file a suit together. There is no other way in which we're going to require this company to make it more affordable for you to file this challenge. In this case, they actually talked about other ways in which American Express could have allowed for other sort of ways in which it would have been affordable for them. So, for example, they could have said, okay, well, you can't file this claim together, but we're going to shift the cost such that we'll eat some of the cost so that you can each file this individually. And that also would have been an acceptable alternative. But basically, they said there's no requirement that filing a challenge need be affordable for us to enforce this sort of act that's been invoked in all of these cases, the Federal Arbitration Act.
Right. It was essentially like the court was saying, you have the right to challenge a monopoly, but we don't have to make it easy for you. Is that kind of the understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I think even beyond that, we don't have to make it possible for you. I mean, the idea was that they were effectively unable to file this claim as a result of not being able to file it together, and that's certainly, what the dissenting justices were saying, and that was certainly their argument. And they were saying, right, you have a right to file this, but if you can't afford it, if it's not economical, then that's your problem. And it's pretty significant in the sense that they were enforcing a federal law, the Antitrust Act. In other cases, there's been a lot of other laws at issue, and a lot of the trial lawyers have rightly been pointing out that the impact is that you can't enforce any of these laws. The enforcement mechanism for these laws is filing a legal challenge, and if it's not economical to do so, then you can't do it. And they're really invoking this one same law, the Federal Arbitration Act, to claim that they're barred from doing this. And that really wasn't the intent of this act at all. And I think that's also a point that the dissenting justices have been making over and over. But yeah, I mean, it was a big loss for consumers. It was a big loss for workers and other individuals. And because this was small businesses this time, it was really a big loss for everybody but the mega corporations, this quote unquote little guy relative to these huge corporations. And the takeaway was, no one wins when they go up against a corporation.
Yeah, I mean, these arbitration clauses are in so many of the terms and service agreements that we sign or agree to in virtually every technology product, even some products we're unaware that just by consuming or purchasing a product, we are de facto agreeing to these arbitration agreements, which really limit consumer and small business rights to challenge a large corporation in court.
And on top of it, hi, Nicole, this is Shane here. Because they're monopolists, they can demand that these arbitration clauses be ridiculously draconian. The fact that Justice Kagan wrote, the monopolist gets to use the monopoly power to insist on the contract that you can therefore not go after because they're monopolists.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think a lot of people hear about these things and they think, well, I probably was never going to file a lawsuit anyway, so this isn't going to affect me. But that is the way in which it impacts you, because you don't realize the extent to which these corporations are being held accountable by these lawsuits by someone. And when these lawsuits can't happen at all, then they're right. You want to challenge their monopoly? Well, you can't. So they have even more of a monopoly, so they're going to impose even more draconian contract provisions. I think that's exactly right. And, you'll see the impacts even if you're not the one filing the lawsuit, because you're not enforcing the laws that are supposed to keep them, doing what they're supposed to be doing.
And I think this seems, and as you've pointed out over on Think Progress, just to remind everybody, we're speaking with Nicole Flato of Think Progress Justice. You can check it out, of course, at thinkprogress.org, and you can follow her on Twitter at Nick Flato. This seems to be an overall theme that you have done an excellent job, Nicole, pointing out, is this pro-big business Supreme Court. We've seen it in case after case, and this American Express ruling really reminds me of, the challenges to Walmart, their denial to allow workers to file a lawsuit as a class. It seems like, if I'm reading the cards right here, that this court will find virtually any excuse it can to rule in favor of big business. Am I imagining that?
I mean, it certainly seems that way much of the time, and certainly to some extent the statistics bear that out. As you point out, there's been a few studies, surveys, et cetera, recently that have shown that, the two of the justices who are in the majority much of the time, and all of the Roberts Court justices are more likely to side with sort of corporate-friendly interests than any other court in the past 65 years. And likewise, the Chamber of Commerce, which is, the lobby for sort of big business, has had an exceptional win rate and other influence in other ways on this court. So I think there is a lot of evidence to support that. Of course, there are exceptions to that. I think the idea is that where it's a matter of having access to be able to hold corporations accountable, they have no, I don't want to say sympathy toward that, but they're sort of willing to take the corporation's arguments in their best possible light without considering the other arguments in the best possible light. That's sort of what seems to be happening over and over again. And it's really been, 5 justices over and over again. Again, in this case, it was the 5 conservative justices who sided in the majority, and 3 in the minority because one was recused from the case, but the same split and the same sort of frustration and real anger coming from the 3/4 dissenting justices. Yes.
Yeah, it seems like other people are catching on, including some of our senators, to this issue that you have been pointing out. And I would love to say that it's because they're reading your awesome posts over at Think Progress, but I know we can't say that for sure. One of which being Senator Elizabeth Warren, who just earlier this month spoke at the American Constitution Society and highlighted a quite lengthy speech just about the issue that you were just talking about. And I just pulled one quote that I really love when she encapsulates the impact of this pro-corporate court. She says, if you care about the Affordable Care Act, if you care about the Voting Rights Act, if you care about financial reform, then your fight is not just on policy, your fight is not just in Congress, your fight is also in the courts. And I feel like that is the overall impact. That is the end result if we don't pay attention to this pro-business leaning that you have done such a great job pointing out. Would you agree that it's that important?
Yes, absolutely. I was at her remarks. I'm very involved in that group, and I think many of us there, have felt that way for some time. That sentiment that, if you care about these issues, you need to care about the courts. And, it was really wonderful to hear her say it, because it's not that other senators haven't said that sort of thing in the past, but she really, as a new player, as someone who really is an advocate for sort of consumer interests, is really drawing the line between the two in a very effective and powerful way. And she's absolutely right. She cited a lot of these same studies about sort of corporate influence on the court. Went along above that, she makes some other really good points about how most judges either come from corporate law firms or are prosecutors at the below the Supreme Court level, and those courts, of course, are really important also, and sort of set the stage for the Supreme Court and or the final arbiters on a lot of these cases. So, I think she was really making the point that we need to care about who we're confirming to these courts. We need to care about who's being appointed, and that this implicates no less than the statutes that are on the table.
Yeah. She said we must make judicial nominations a priority. It's time for a new generation of judges. We need sustained pressure to get those judges in front of the Senate, and we need to change the filibuster rules so we can get them through. Would you add anything to that as far as ways we can help shape this process?
So I think one of the reasons why her point was so important is because those are the primary ways in which you can affect judicial nominations. But one of the reasons why it's so important to affect judicial nominations is in part because the other mechanisms for change are not really feasible either. For example, in the context of arbitration, the Federal Arbitration Act, is being misread as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of other people, and being manipulated in a way that it wasn't intended. But another remedy for that would be for Congress to pass a bill to clarify what they meant when they passed that law. And there have been proposals to that effect that would be very useful. But of course, in our current Congress, no one thinks that a bill like that is going anywhere. We've got other, comprehensive immigration reform and other major things that are not even going anywhere. And so the idea is that, we have these laws on the table. They need to be enforced. And the courts should do that, especially in the absence of a Congress who has the time and or will to clarify what they meant by the already existing laws. I think the things that she pointed out really are the primary mechanisms for being involved in judicial nominations. One of them is to really make it clear that it's a priority, whether it be by calling your senators. If it's a nominee from your state, they do have state nominating commissions that you can be involved in, and that's for federal nominees, which is primarily what she was referring to in the speech. But state nominees are also really important. A lot of states have judicial elections, and there are all sorts of other issues related to that. But certainly it's really important to be informed about the candidates. And filibuster reform is really, really primary to that. What's happened with a lot of the most qualified judges who some Republicans were concerned would ultimately be, superstars and or make their way up to the Supreme Court is that they were effectively blocked by the filibuster as it exists right now. And certainly reform would be central to the major obstacles that we've seen there.
Well, in the words of Elizabeth Warren, this will be a hard fight. There will be many battles ahead, but I believe in what we can do together. And I think that following the amazing work you do, Nicole, will help unite us, help educate us, and help make these changes possible. So we really appreciate all that you do and for you taking time with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle, and thanks for highlighting these issues again.
Absolutely. Nicole Flato, everybody, absolutely brilliant, does a great job, and delightful to speak to, so double bonus for us. You can follow along at Think Progress Justice, thinkprogress.org, and you can follow her on Twitter at Nick Flato, and we'll put all those links up after the show. We will be right back with more here on Talking Left. You're listening to me, Danielle and Shano. Stick around.
Everyone expected just a piece of fluff, but we wanted to do something important. You know, issue stuff.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/canceranswerline.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday right here on 1480 AM We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 AM We Act Radio.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Arc. The Arc is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Arc is also home to the Arc Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Arc, so stop by and see them. The Arc, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Arc's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. We've been talking about, corporate power and big banks and lawsuit, the scales being tipped in favor of big business. And as if to encapsulate all those points in one story, we found an incredible story about a woman named Natalie Gunshannon. She previously worked at McDonald's in Texas. She only worked there from April 24th to May 15th. When she received her first paycheck,
paycheck in quotes.
Yes, paycheck. She was handed a Chase Bank debit card with instructions on how to use it, including the fees that were attached, such as a $1.50 charge for ATM withdrawals, $5 for an over-the-counter cash withdrawal, $1 for a balance inquiry, 75 cents per online bill payment, and $15 for lost or stolen debit card. So essentially, somebody who is already making minimum wage, she was making $7.44 an hour, so cents above minimum wage, now has all these additional fees taken out of the money she just earned, just to access her own money.
So therefore, she is not making the minimum wage. They are paying her under the minimum wage, which is against the law.
Right. I mean, just first of all, any prepaid debit card that charges you $1 for balance inquiries, $5 to withdraw your own money.
A lot of the gift debit card type things, that's essentially what they are.
Yeah.
There's a bigger issue here, though, when it comes to bank stranglehold over our economy, in that if you get a paycheck and you don't want to deal with the bank, you don't like banks, you don't like credit unions, you're not going to get cash.
Right.
You get a check. What are you going to do with it? No,
cash it.
Right, but you have to go to that specific bank and they charge. Or if you have to open an account, then there's all kinds of charges associated with that. In poorer neighborhoods, you've seen the checks cashed. They take a percentage. No matter what, somebody's getting a piece of that check because it's on a piece of paper issued by a bank.
Right.
Our entire payroll system is based on the banking system, which is privatized.
Right.
If we had state public banks, just each state had their own state-owned bank, and that's where payroll went through, I think we could fix a lot of this.
I mean, just in what you're talking about, think that in order to avoid a lot of these fees, somebody would have to open a bank account. Think about making $7.44 an hour and then keeping with things like minimum balance requirements. Otherwise, guess what? You get a charge. Or guess you're probably spending every last cent of your income just to survive, most likely ending up in overdraws, more money to the bank.
That's where the banks make a lot of their money.
Right.
I mean, a ton of their money.
But Natalie Gunshannon, she went to her manager. She said she did not want a Chase debit card. She wanted a regular paycheck. They denied, said that was the only means necessary. She even went to the corporate office, and she was told that the card was the only option. So finally, she quit the job. She said, I will not be paid like this. And she is now involved in a class action lawsuit with her and other employees wanting to recover these fees. It's a perfect example of how if Natalie Gunshannon was to take on this case by herself, what is she going to stand to gain? The $10 in charges she may have lost in that 1 week or 2 weeks of pay? It wouldn't be economical. It wouldn't be cost effective for her to take this case on.
And on the other side, if she were part of a union, they wouldn't try to pull this in the first place.
Right. But together, her and these employees stand a much better chance of recovering.
They've unionized in front of the court.
Right.
Let's help them unionize as workers.
Exactly.
To stop this in the first place. Why do we have to go to court for this?
Right. And how about let's pay somebody more than $7.44 an hour to begin with.
There you go.
That's about half what she should probably be making. So just a perfect case that we'll try and keep an eye on, and we wish the best for Natalie and for her fellow party
aggrieved employees.
Thank you. We're going to come right back with Justin Duckham, our surprise guest today. He's a reporter for the Talk Radio News Service, and he's going to be speaking with us next. So stick around.
Yeah, sorry about that. The show's gotten a little lowbrow.
What are you talking about? It's like the most hilarious show ever.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Let's go cruising again. Yes, take another wild and crazy ride with me down the twisted road of Texas Senator Ted Cruz's mind. The new darling of Tea Party Republicans got elected last year in part by stoking right-wing fear that the United Nations is planning to seize America's golf courses. Riding that momentum, Cruz is now gaining national notoriety as a senator who takes extremism to the extreme and beyond. Ted's latest trip swerves through the immigration debate. He uses the personal saga of his father to make the case that there should be no path to citizenship for the millions of undocumented immigrants living here, no matter how much they're contributing to our economy and society. Daddy Cruz, he points out again and again, followed the rules 66 years ago to leave Cuba and became an American citizen. Quote, every step of the way, the elder Cruz recently affirmed in a radio interview, I have been here legally. Well, not every step. Rafael Cruz admits that he only got here by bribing a Cuban official. Technically speaking, that's illegal. Still, father and son both tear up in telling how Rafael got a job, eventually going on to start a small business and to work towards the American dream. Unmentioned in this soaring Horatio Alger tale is that Rafael did all of that American dream stuff in Canada, where he became a citizen and where Ted was born. In fact, Rafael did not become an American citizen until 2005, nearly half a century after leaving Cuba. What took him so long? I don't know, the father now says, adding ruefully, I guess laziness. This is Jim Hightower saying, really? How does that rationalize slamming America's door in the face of other hardworking immigrants? I guess Ted thinks they should have bribed their way to America.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As the U.S. Senate struggles to pass immigration reform in a form that will also pass the House, the AFL-CIO is reminding lawmakers that Americans in all but paper deserve a path to citizenship. The Labor Federation says immigrants should not be forced to run an obstacle course. The AFL-CIO says it opposes any amendments to the bill that, quote, impose hard triggers whose real purpose and real impact will be to close off the opportunity for eligible immigrants to become citizens, end quote. Meanwhile, SEIU Secretary-Treasurer Eliseo Medina says a CBO score on the immigration reform bill shows it's good for the U.S. economy by reducing the deficit and increasing the gross domestic product. A 17-day, 15-city, coast-to-coast Summer of Solidarity tour is planned for later this summer as local union activists and community allies support local struggles, connecting them with the broader fight against corporate power. United Steelworker Union locals and the United Electrical Radio and Machine Workers of America will kick off that tour August 17th in Philadelphia, wrapping it up on Labor Day in Los Angeles. More information at summerofsolidarity.org. As the Netroots Nation Conference kicks off in San Jose, members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus will join workers to launch a Raise Up America campaign in support of the low-wage worker movement. It's aimed at raising pay for American workers to get the economy moving again for everyone. Low-wage workers, supported by unions like SEIU, Unite Here, and UFCW, are pushing for higher wages and the right to form unions in cities from New York City and Chicago to Seattle. Striking banana workers are awaiting word from Del Monte on reinstating 59 fired workers. Jesse Russell reports.
Today is the 9th day of a strike by more than 650 banana workers in Costa Rica. The workers walked off the job due to Banana Development Company, a Del Monte subsidiary, firing 59 workers. Those workers were part of a strike in 2011, which resulted in the company negotiating a contract that included provisions saying it would not retaliate against workers who took part in strike actions. A judge has since ruled that 2011 strike illegal. Due to the current strike, 3 banana plantations are currently paralyzed, and the workers are calling on other plantations to join their protest. The workers have also taken to the streets, disrupting traffic on Thursday and Friday of last week. Del Monte is currently in negotiations regarding the worker demands to have the fired employees reinstated, but to date, the company has publicly reaffirmed it stands by its decision.
Workers Independent News is underwritten in part by the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union.
Workers Independent News puts workers and their unions on the national radio news airwaves every day. To help keep labor's voice on the air, go to laborradio.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
So, I'm a dog, and I just got adopted by this new human guy, and I'm starting to wonder how he got along without me. I mean, okay, something as simple as walking around the block. He's got this leash thing, and he puts me on one end and him on the other, and I'm just taking him around. I think he's afraid of getting lost. Without that leash and me guiding him along, I don't think he'd find his way back home. But it's kind of cute.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. We are very excited to be joined by our next guest, Justin Duckham. He is a reporter for the Talk Radio News Service, and he is a personal friend of ours. You can check out their stuff, of course, at talkradionews.com. Justin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Danielle, it's always great to talk to you guys.
Oh, we are very excited. We wanted to, you follow Congress. You are constantly following the news and following what's going on in our nation's capital. So we just wanted to get your insight into what the heck went on with the Farm Bill and how we ended up with that bill failing.
Well, that's a very good question. And it's worth noting that in the Senate, where it's sort of like herding cats for Harry Reid, this was legislation that passed twice. And we could not pass it in the lower chamber, even though this is something that everybody agrees is an absolutely necessary bill, sort of like the defense authorization bill or whatnot to a certain extent, since it affects a large portion of our economy and whatnot. And, they could not get it through, even though at a certain point, even with the deep Republican cuts that they were making to the STAT program, it looks like enough Democrats were still willing to sign on. And it wasn't until there were some last-minute poison pill amendments that were added on that it really just crumbled apart. But nevertheless, Eric Cantor and a lot of the Republican leadership broke the cardinal rule of being a congressional leader and brought it to the floor without ensuring that they had enough votes. And this was not the first time this has happened, as we all know. We know that Boehner has, brought forward a number of pieces of legislation that his leadership were convinced was going to pass with the Hastert rule with majority Republican support, and then eventually saw that explode in their faces. So this certainly raises quite a few questions over the ability of the Republican leadership to lead, especially with Eric Cantor, who a lot of people think if Boehner was to be ousted would be replaced by him, who would be more, able to reach out to conservatives and win them over. But nevertheless, even though this was a more conservative bill, and even though we saw a lot of, glad-handing coming out from Eric Cantor and whatnot, this was something that still failed. So it raises not just a question about Boehner's leadership, but the entire Republican leadership at large.
And I know Republicans aren't big on science and probably not counting, but who is the Republican whip? I mean, they thought it was going to pass, I believe. I think they were surprised at this. Who was the one counting the votes?
This was Kevin McCarthy, of course, the majority whip. And basically, he has not been one of the more aggressive whips that we've seen. We in the past, Republicans had some around the last prominent guy they had in that position was the hammer. Tom DeLay. There we go. I'm blanking on his name. And he was a much more aggressive person who was somebody who could really get a lot of those key votes in order. And with this time around. And, just going back on this, the obvious argument that a lot of people make is, give Boehner a break. He is dealing with a caucus that is heavily divided. You have the, kind of civil war going on between the Tea Partiers and those who kind of lockstep with Republican leadership. But that just doesn't fly. We saw Nancy Pelosi last time around being an incredibly effective speaker, and she took control of a caucus that was arguably just as divided, if not more so. We know that within the Democratic caucus, there are the moderates, there are the blue dog Democrats, there are the progressive wing of the party, and then there's a whole bunch of other caucuses divided among issues like race and whatnot. We have the Hispanic caucus, we have the Black Congressional Caucus, but nevertheless, we saw the Democratic leadership be able to kind of consolidate a lot of those voices on bills that they, typically would not have supported, such as healthcare reform. We saw a lot of blue dog support go for that, and that, ended up costing a lot of those people some pretty, tight races in their congressional districts and sort of decimated that caucus. But nevertheless, we saw, those voices in the Democratic leadership being able to get them together. And that's just not something that we've seen with the Republicans in charge.
Not at all. I mean, I think this vote was a perfect picture of the civil war, as you called it, going on in the Republican Party. And I think it's the end result of their gerrymandering. They're pushing these districts and making them so difficult to win unless you're extreme right. I mean, what does it mean for the party in general that 62 of your own members voted against your bill?
It's a really good question, and it shows that we have sort of a new breed of Republican who are less interested in sort of making policy and governing and whatnot than sticking true to sort of the bizarre principles of the extreme base who got them elected. Let's just not forget that a lot of these people were elected in 2010 and initially, and then 2012 if they survived that, and to win as a Tea Party candidate in a congressional race like that, either you need to be from a deeply red district or you need to be elected in 2010 initially in a race that was essentially only bringing out the most dedicated diehards to the polls, since that was a midterm election, and we only see the most extreme people come out for that. So it's not that surprising that that's how sort of the makeup has gone. But it is having some pretty disastrous consequences, as a lot of people would argue. And it's something that doesn't look like it's necessarily going to go away. There are some high hopes that the Democrats are going to be able to take back the House in 2014.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, sorry.
No, I'm just saying, but this is, again, going to be a midterm election. And it's going to really be about who's more motivated to come out in an election year that is not a presidential election year. And in this situation, we're seeing sort of the rise of the Tea Party again with that sort of retro rally on the Hill that we saw, with the new invigoration with the IRS scandal, the new Benghazi obsession. And we're seeing a lot of those far-right voices sort of be re-energized again. And I would not be surprised to see something similar that we saw in 2010 happening in 2014, where we see the most extreme voices get the most traction.
Yeah, but if in those red districts, if they run a Tea Party in the primary, and the Tea Party is radically crazy to the right, and they win that, and they're up against a moderate Democrat, I think that's the hope for 2014, because people weren't real as informed about the Tea Party in 2010. And we saw in 2012 people like Alan West go bye-bye, and now we're seeing Michelle Bachmann leave. I'm not saying that they're all gone, but I think the electorate is a little more informed about what damage they can do, and I think that's really the hope in 2014.
No, and that's a very good point. But we also have to remember that in 2012, that was a presidential election year, and we had a lot of congressional candidates sort of just winning for the Democrats on the fact that we saw so many people coming out for the presidential election and then voting, for the Democrat by de facto, since there's more Democrats coming out. And, if it was a certain situation where people were really wised up to the Tea Party and were less willing to go for those people, we would not have seen so many Tea Party candidates with their primaries in the lead up to 2012. We saw Todd Aiken going in there, and he beat off a lot of, more moderate Republicans in his race. And we saw, certain examples like that pop up all over. And I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if we saw the same thing in the lead up to 2014. There are a lot of races, such as in Georgia for the Senate with Paul Brown, who's running, who has a lot of Tea Party support, who is a very militant Republican, and I think he's probably doing relatively well. And, without, a more moderate election bringing out more people who would vote sort of just down the middle, I think we may see another return to extremism, even though a lot of people now know better.
Well, hopefully you are not correct? Just to remind everybody,
I hope it was well, but you
yeah.
know, we just have to remember that these people are reinvigorated. You know,
yeah.
For better or for worse, they are coming out because of the IRS scandal. They're enraged by Benghazi. We're now seeing the weird sort of Ron Paul wing of the party being invigorated by the NSA scandal and whatnot. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that doesn't necessarily go away, and instead just you know, kind of counteracts those who want to see something done and just bring the crazies to the poll for both the primary and the midterms.
Yeah. Just to remind everybody, we're speaking with Justin Duckham. He's a reporter for the Talk Radio News Service. You can check it out at talkradionews.com. I'm just curious on what your take of, Speaker John Boehner and whether Eric Cantor is going to take over. I know you hinted at that earlier, but after hearing some of these clips after the Farm Bill, Shane, I know you have a few of these. I just wanted to get your reaction to the hypocrisy of Cantor and if he'll be any more persuasive as a leader. Shane, do you have a favorite in those clips there?
I like them all. I don't like the Cantor part. I like the Hoyer part. I do have one here. I'll just play one of them.
Okay.
There was never an intention at all for our side to say we want to take away the safety net of the food stamp program. What we saw today was a Democratic leadership in the House that was insistent to undo years and years of bipartisan work on an issue like a farm bill and decide to make it a partisan issue.
Don't blame Democrats for the loss today. You didn't bring up the farm bill when it was reported out in a bipartisan basis last year. You didn't even bring it to the floor because your party couldn't come together supporting their chairman's bill. Let's bring that bill back to the floor and have a vote on it that was reported out on a bipartisan basis. I think it would pass. Maybe not because of your votes. That's been your problem all along. Don't blame Democrats for the loss of that bill. We produced 218 votes for almost everything we put on this floor. Yeah, you pushed my button.
Okay, I love Steny Hoyer. I'm so happy to say that we live in his district. But can Eric Cantor do any better a role, as a leader? Is he just as hypocritical and ridiculous as John Boehner, maybe minus the orange and the alcohol?
That was the initial hope for a lot of the more right-wing members of the party. We had people who initially thought that Cantor was going to be sort of the more conservative voice who was going to be able to really bring these people together. And we know for quite some time that Cantor had his sights on Boehner's seat, and there was a lot of talk about that going on for some time. But we've seen numerous examples of Boehner, trying to craft, compromises or trying to bring legislation forward and seeing it fall apart. But he still has his job. And there doesn't necessarily seem like there's going to be a major coup that's going to happen anytime soon, unless if there's sort of a more acceptable candidate to a lot of these people who could, sort of bridge that divide between the Tea Party and the more rank-and-file people. And unfortunately, I just don't think a lot of people see that in Eric Cantor anymore.
Yeah.
I think, he's failed enough. This argument, of course, was ridiculous. This was legislation that he pushed. He was, of course, pushing for Sandy relief as well, and didn't have his voice heard in that. And I just don't see Cantor being that person that he was back in the days where there was really the knives out for John Boehner.
Yeah.
Perhaps Lee Gohmert can get Alan West in as Speaker like he wanted to before. You do realize the Speaker of the House doesn't actually have to be a member of the House under the Constitution.
That's very true.
Yes. Well, Justin, you certainly know Congress much better than the rest of us, and we really appreciate you taking time with us. So no Eric Cantor. Maybe just out of curiosity, do they like having John Boehner someone they can push around?
Well, I think, they must. At the end of the day, a lot of these Tea Party candidates are going back to the districts saying that they are not, walking lockstep behind their congressional leadership and that they are independent voices representing the, morals and conservatives of those who got them elected. And I think it looks good to them if they can say that they bucked the leadership and if they can do it in a relatively consequence-free environment, as we've seen with Boehner, somebody who, doesn't really have that many bargaining chips, doesn't really have that, many tools to either punish or reward. So I think, I think they probably do enjoy having somebody that they can, kick around pretty easily.
Yeah, because that Maverick thing worked out so well for McCain and Palin, but we'll have to watch it, and hopefully, Justin, you'll come back on and update us as more of the soap opera of Congress unfolds. Thanks so much for taking time with us. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here, guys.
Thanks. Justin Duckham, reporter with the Talk Radio News Service and a personal friend of ours, someone we are always delighted to hear from. And he really knows his stuff about Congress. I am duly impressed, although not surprised, at how brilliant he is. You can check out all his stuff at talkradionews.com. You can follow them on Twitter at Political Brief, and we'll put those links up with the blog post after the show. You've been listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we will be back with more, so stick around.
I'm David Schuster of Take Action News, and you're listening to my favorite show other than my own, Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.